In the previous lesson, I showed you that the flexibility of the JSON database that we can add in test. So now we can actually go over to test and we've got an output here. So we see that whatever was written here is coming out. So this is the same thing that if I go to profile, I get the return data in profile. If I go to posts, I get all of that returned JSON from posts. So a lot of flexibility there when you're building out your applications. So you can really customize this stuff. So let's go back to the index page, and this time what I wanted to do is I wanted to send my XHR request. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to set up a function in order to do that, and I'm going to call it function, and I'm going to say make request. And we're going to pass in some parameters. So one of the parameters that we can pass in there is we need a URL. We also need to know the request type, so whether it's a post or a get. And for now, we're just going to keep it at those two. And of course, we're going to probably add something to that as well, so maybe something like data. But we're not going to be making use of that data at the current moment, so we'll just leave it at that. So we're passing in the 3 parameters in there to make this request. So this is going to make it a lot easier to create those requests. So every time we launch this request, we're creating a new XHR object, so new XML HTTP request object. So that creates a brand new one, and we can then do XHR open. And here is where we do the request type. So first of all, request type, so get. Next, let's add in the URL. And we're also going to set it as true. And then the XHR, and we're going to send it over. So that something is going to happen whenever we click on there. So now we need to also check to make sure the ready state is changing. So let's do that as well. So XHR ready state, or it should be on ready state change. So it's on ready state change. So whenever that ready state changes, that's when we fire off this function. And within here, we're going to check to see if the XHR object is ready state 4. Now you could also use fetch, you could use jQuery, you could use any number of other ways to make AJAX requests. So this is just the default in JavaScript. So I know it's a little bit long there, but we're outputting all of that information. So let's go ahead and we'll output something to the message. So once we make this request, let's grab the message. So let's set up a variable here, message. We're just going to grab document, get element by ID. Remember, we created that message element. So up there at the top there, so we can pass messages in. So now that we've got that object and we've given a variable name of message, we can easily update the inner HTML and we can return back some information. So let's do JSON stringify, and we're going to return back a stringified version of the XHR object. So how about that? And we can also do response type. We'll do actually the XHR response. So we don't need to get all of that information. So we click it, and we need to send over this information to make this request. So the URL that we're passing through, and so the information that maybe we want to pull back is the posts. So this is the URL. So add that in there. And it looks like we're going to need a little bit more space here. So let me open that up. The request type is get. And the data, so we don't have any data quite yet. So we can just put some placeholder information there, or we can just put an empty object. So there we go. So let's try this out for real. So hit load, and there we go. So we're getting all of that information being returned back, and of course we've stringified it, so it's not really easy to read. If we do just the response, we can refresh and try that again. So it does come back in a string format, in a JSON string format. So we know that if we want to make use of this data, then we have to use JSON parse in order to make use of it. So we can also do that within the console. And so that's JSON parse. So that's the opposite of the stringify. And XHR response. So now when I hit that, we can see that we're getting this nicely formatted JSON here. And now, of course, we can make use of this information that's being returned back after we make the request. So the next step in this process is going to be to loop through this data and output it within our HTML so that we can actually see this data that's being returned back. So not within this type of string format where it's a lot harder to read. We want to loop through it, and we want to return back each one of those items. So that's what's coming up next. So go ahead and try this out for yourself. Make your AJAX request over to your local host, port 3000, or if you change the port, whatever port it is, -posts, and return back some of that data sitting in the JSON database. Because this is the first step of getting really used to and comfortable with working with JSON, and we know that we've got the database sitting here locally, so we can always update it, and we can do whatever changes we want to it. And I'm also going to show you how easy it is to post content into this. So all of this is coming up in the upcoming lessons.